many of you have seen the movie Mean Girls? Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to show a clip from the beginning part of Mean Girls, and just to set up the situation. Lindsay Lohan's character, chick with the red hair, she just started a new school, so two people at the school are going through the lunchroom and sort of pointing out the different cliques in the lunchroom to her.
Everybody there, you got your freshmen, ROTC guys, preps, JV jocks, Asian nerds, cool Asians, varsity jocks, unfriendly black bodies, girls who eat their feelings, girls who don't eat anything, desperate wannabes, burnouts, sexually active bandies, the greatest people you will ever meet, and the worst. Beware of the plastic.
Hey. And that's really what we wanted to show, just how many different groups there are. This was a high school setting, but there's that in the middle school setting as well. Is it on?
Hit the one that says RGB.
Okay,
yeah.
RGB. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're the social group. I'm Brittany Kraft. And I have fitting in. What was the problem that I looked at? There are three problems that were really addressed, and that is motivation, achievement, and aggression. For motivation, it's thought that if the friends weren't motivated, then the student wouldn't be motivated, so they looked into that problem in a lot of my studies. Achievement, why do some students succeed academically, and do their friends succeed as well, or do they even have friends? There was a study that saw if they had friends or not as to whether they achieved better. And their aggression as to like who is aggressive and why, and if that helps them to fit in or if that doesn't help them to fit in. What was found? For motivation in their peer groups, and we just saw all those peer group examples, if a peer group thinks that something is important, then it's likely that that student will think it's important. But if your group of friends doesn't think that, then that's not the cool way to do anything. So for this, if the student's a hard worker, but then before middle school, and then they hit middle school and their friends don't think it's important to work hard in school or anything like that, they might change the type of person that they are to fit into that group. And that's seen a lot as they come in. And that can change their motivation. And then their mutual friends. A study was done on motivation that involved students for 2 years, so it started when they were in 6th grade and then on to 8th grade. And they surveyed of who their friends were and then what they valued as important. And so then they looked at if there was mutual friends, so both people had to write that other person down as a friend to have it count. You couldn't just say you were friends with so-and-so. I couldn't say I was friends with Lisa, and then Lisa said she's friends with Kim, but not me. Then that didn't count as a friendship. And it was found that students with mutual friends at the beginning of middle school had better social and academic adjustment and motivation than those students that did not. And then, I mean, when you have a friend, we all can see it as well. When you have that other person to kind of help you decide what's the norm, that's kind of how the middle schoolers do that. Then there was achievement, and I focused on academic achievement. Some students stated that they would rather get a C to pass than get an A and be made fun of by their peers. So I felt like that was kind of sad, and that's why I put that quote up there. If you look like you're trying, you'll catch it from your classmates. So it wasn't necessarily that it was bad to get that A, it was bad to look like you were trying to get that A. So if you had to try in school, then you just didn't. But if you got an A easily, then you were fine and you could still do well and be popular and have your friends. So basically, then it was also stated that being in a remedial class, everybody knows who's in that remedial class. So that didn't really help because a quote from one of the students said, "We know who the dumb kids are," and that's from my article with Bray. And then the students have the same beliefs in those classes of looking like the teacher's pet. So even if you're in the remedial class, if you try in that class, it's the same as trying in every other class. So even though these classes were made to improve these students that needed a little bit of extra time and needed a little bit extra help from teachers, it didn't work because their peers were still giving them a hard time for trying or looking like a teacher's pet if they got that extra help. But then, achievement in extracurriculars, it was found that people in extracurriculars and sports and things like that were more of the popular kids in school. If you just did school, and again, if you just worked really hard for that A, then you weren't as cool in middle school. And some groups thought that other extracurriculars were important, but that it did not necessarily make them popular. So it wasn't strongly found that you had to be in a sport to be popular. It was more of the academics again. And then something else that was found for this is that humiliation by teachers. We all know that we use sarcasm. A lot of us use sarcasm almost every day. And that you have to be careful of using that sarcasm in the classroom just because you might mean it as funny as a teacher, but that student might play along while they're in there, but it really hurt their feelings, or you just fueled a fire for something to happen out in the hallway. So, that was something that was brought up. And if you don't like that teacher, if you're the one being made fun of by that teacher or having sarcasm used on you, then you aren't going to work as hard for that teacher later on because they just allowed for all this other stuff to happen to you outside of the classroom. Whereas if they helped you out, you would out. Okay. Aggression was a big thing that they focused, a lot of my studies focused on to see how that led to fitting in middle school. And so I thought this quote was also very interesting. Teachers have to worry about the kid who's doing the bullying as well as the one who's getting it. Those kids that are bullies now end up in trouble in school and in life. So as teachers, we not only have to worry about who's being picked on and all of that, but we have to worry about who's doing the picking on and why they're doing that and helping them just the same. So it's kind of similar to we can't take sides. We have to work with both sides and be aware that both students are having problems. So with that, humiliation happens from aggression. You have to worry, effects of being humiliated by someone. This is any type of humiliation that could happen to a middle schooler. Leads to drug and alcohol abuse, attendance problems, dropping out, pregnancy, and suicide. So a big thing is, I read one of the students didn't want to come to school for an entire week because she was being picked on the week before. So you have to notice whether students are missing because they're actually sick or not, or if there's something else deeper that you could have helped out while they were in the classroom. I also found that some students found it easier to get pregnant in middle school so that they wouldn't have to go to school because it was more acceptable to drop out once you were pregnant than to drop out just because you were being bullied. So that was another very interesting fact that I found on that. Bully Busters was something that this teacher brought into his school, and he would teach educators how to deal with bullies instead of just ignoring some situations, because I know in a lot of job trainings I've had, if you're in the middle of a fight, we're told to step back and not get hit during it as well. So instead of just stepping back, knowing what to say when you step back, because you aren't going to want to necessarily grab a student, but you're going to want to know how to deal with them. And then there was a test run in the school, and the data actually showed that it helped teachers' self-efficacy. So it did actually help them, and there was less disciplinary referrals. So they did actually learn something from it, and it did help in the schools. Then there's relational aggression. There are different types of aggression that was studied. And relational was the purposeful manipulation of or damage to social reputation with the intent of harming another. So that's the main one that we see in middle schools. That intention is a big thing. The proactive aggression, both object-oriented and instrumental and person-directed aggression. And then reactive aggression, acts performed in retaliation to having been hurt, angered, or upset. So if you were bullied in say 6th grade and then you shot up in height in 7th grade, you could then bully back to that person that was bullying you before. So these aggressions were related to popularity, and it was found that relational aggression was the one that was found the most acceptable. So basically, you could have the purposefulness of ruining someone's social reputation instead of actually physically harming someone. That didn't make you as popular as just under the lines harming someone's reputation. And it hindered friendships, but people who used it were perceived as popular. So using the aggression didn't actually gain you friendships, but it gained you the perceived popularity. So you might not have all those friends, like that would generally be the popularity. You have all these people that'll follow you, but they're just too scared to not follow you, so they're going to. And then dominance of popularity. So aggression uses dominance as well, so that's kind of why that would work out. So part of fitting in middle school, you might use tobacco as well. I focus on that because we have Kim.
Thank you. Okay, I'm Kim Dennis, and I did tobacco use in middle school. Okay, and now this is completely voluntary, but I think I'll get you guys moving or standing up. So stand up if you ever tried a cigarette or smoked during your middle school years. Okay, wow. Okay. Very quiet. Very good. Okay. Stand up if you know someone now that has tried or is smoking now in middle school. Wow. Okay. Thank you. You can sit down. Okay, so that is a pretty good amount. Okay, so I also want to start off with some tobacco facts. And when we think tobacco, we kind of think of cigarettes, don't we? We don't think of the smokeless tobacco normally. And so tobacco can consist of many different types. We think of mainly cigarettes, but there's also cigars, snuff, hookahs, chewing tobacco, and pipe smoking. So there's many different types of tobacco that's really dangerous for us. So nicotine is found in cigarettes and smokeless tobacco, and it's very addicting, and it's really hard to quit once you stop, and it's a really big problem in adolescents and adults. And it causes things like bad breath, brown and stained teeth, ground down teeth, black hairy tongues, gum disease and loss of teeth, and receding gums, cancers of the cheek, esophagus, lip, palate, and the tongue. And there's a lot of disgusting things found inside all this tobacco. Arsenic, formaldehyde, I think that's how you pronounce it, dirt, fertilizer, soot, pesticides, cyanide, manure, nicotine, dead bugs. That was something I did not know that I think is really nasty. I did not know that, something I learned. There's at least 19 different types of cancer-causing substance called nitrosamines inside tobacco products. So, and it can cause many different cancer type diseases. So, yeah, it's really dangerous. So, many people think that like older people can die easier from it, but young children can just as easier. And they think that young people can stop just as easier, so they're like, you can quit, don't worry about it, you can quit.
it's easy for you, but kids can't quit just that easy. It's just as hard for them to quit. So don't think, if you're a parent and your kids start smoking, don't think that they can quit just as easy. They just have to sit them down. So, okay. Okay. Well, actually, I have this. Okay. Kids that regularly look to adolescents when they're experimenting with tobacco, they usually are including they're having friends, peers, and parents that are using tobacco. They're overestimating the use of people who smoke. They're linking smoking with a positive social image and perceiving tobacco use as a transition to adulthood. And they're underestimating that nicotine in tobacco is as addictive as heroin. They're not thinking it's a drug like that. And they're having low levels of academic achievement and having low self-esteem or low self-image and lacking skills to resist influence to use tobacco. We're going to talk about access to the tobacco first. And usually the access is in the home, school, stores, and other places in the community. And in the first place in one of the my first research I found was in Virginia, and with Spicer and Bean and other researchers, they said that 8th grade has the greatest access than all the other grades, and non-smokers were more willing to try the tobacco if the habit seemed easier to participate in. So they said, an 8th grader said that if they had, if people told them that they showed them that the dangers, and if they looked gross, they looked ugly, they wouldn't be more willing to try it. And easy access, they said at the home was higher among females than males. So that was also something. It goes beyond the role model aspect, because many people think if they have a friend that's a role model to them, they're like, oh, then you should be hanging out with them. And it's not that, it's more if the role model has the cigarettes with them. So people don't think, it's just the peers they hang out with. No, if the peers have cigarettes and are, saying, oh, here's the cigarettes, here's the cigarettes. So that's something. Okay, openness to future smoking. Exposure to environmental tobacco smoke has been shown to predict adolescent future smoking. Messages in the environment, there are pro and anti-tobacco messages. The pro and anti-tobacco messages, the pro tobacco messages are like good tobacco messages that are positive for the students. So anything that can be, signs in the school saying, don't smoke, this is good for you, just anything positive. And anti-tobacco is just signs, the cigarette with the, slash between it, anything like that. Secondhand smoking children are more curious to smoke, they say, like when they've grown up with their parents or their friends in the car, they say they've been known to be more curious. The perceived benefits, when they think that they look cool, they don't think they'll be harmed, they say they've been more open to be future smokers. And peer acceptance and fitting in, they said that they feel special or dangerous, they'll be more open to act on those feelings. Another research was in California with, his name was Berman, and it was in California. And he was focused on self-identity in the deaf community. And people were curious to find out if people that were deaf were getting enough information, and if they were getting the idea that tobacco was not good for them. They were getting enough information. And they found out that the deaf community was mainly concerned with the social behavior, and they were thinking only about the social positive, the social behavior, and what was socially positive for them. And they found out that they need to have more pro-tobacco messages in the curriculum, and more research needs to be done to help them. also focus on racial disparities and social influences in the rural middle school. And that was done in Mississippi with Muhlenberg and Johnson and others. And they found out that Caucasian students were more likely to be smoking and also have to try tobacco and use tobacco daily and have lived with someone that smokes and also that have friends that smoke and have seen parents smoking. And they were focused on also African American students, and they said that African American students were more likely to inform in the research that no one is allowed to smoke in their house. And that's cigarette tax is also, and this is wrong, I accidentally messed up on this, don't look at that. Cigarette tax is actually lower in the South. And so students are more willing to smoke in the South, they noticed, so sorry about that. Okay. In the family, I also focus on family structure, and I did research in focus on research in South Carolina with Paxton and I can't pronounce it, Volois and Drain, and they were talking about that family structure does motivate adolescents' tobacco use habits, and that Caucasians were more likely to live with both parents, and real or adoptive, and African American students were more likely to live with one parent, or a mother and a step-parent, or non-relatives. And the African American students seem to be less affected by the single mother household and didn't have an effect with tobacco abuse. The African Americans seem to be affected and experimented with tobacco when living with the non-relatives. Caucasian females, regardless of the family structure, have reported smoking before more than Caucasian males. And also preventative programs. I want to discuss that students are students that openly share that they do not enjoy school and have behaved and struggle in school. We need to have preventative programs to focus on them because they struggle a lot and they predict that they have more problems with smoking. So, I mean, we need to focus on everyone, but they seem to have more issues with smoking, so they need to kind of watch out for them more than everyone's, I guess, they said. Okay. Policies and strategies to help. What happens in school normally is we make calls to parents, we suspend them, people underestimate the dangers of tobacco. So we do all these formal things in school, but that's not helping them. We have to, what should be done is talk rationally to the student and, take them to counselors and get them the help they need because that's not going to do anything and it's just going to be like lecturing to them and they feel like, they're talking down, like they need someone to really discuss the problems, discuss the issues and encourage them to be quitting. They don't need to be sitting down and sitting in a classroom or sitting with the principal, and that's not what they need at that age. And spreading intervention programs, just like we talked about with Derek, that's always a really good way to talk to the students, especially early on. That really helps with discussing things at an early age. And I looked at a study on this, and there was a man named Lance Vernon at Case Western Reserve University, and he received a grant and decided to make an intervention program. It was a computer program, and he started with 5th through 7th because he thought that they would adopt his ideas. And he gave students, he modeled a very strong attitude, and it was a computer program, and he gave them all these websites to work with. They were very interactive and easy to use. And he just wanted to encourage them to be quitting as well as their parents. So they were able to use it, their families were able to use it, so it was just really cool to use and very encouraging. So I thought that was a really cool idea. And the last thing I want to talk about is smokeless tobacco in athletics. And it's really becoming really common, and people were really wondering, why aren't coaches putting a stop to it? And why are they letting the children do it? most coaches were being really indifferent about it because they were really more concerned with strategies and, their playing, and they just really weren't concerned. They didn't, but when they took a survey about it, it was Manier and Manier and Dino, and they said, well, we were really indifferent about it, and then he said, well, we kind of knew there was a problem, and we wanted them to stop it, and then they said also that we told the kids to stop using more than once a week, but it really just wasn't coming to an end. And then the schools told them that we really need training for this, and actually in West Virginia, they've actually been making an effort to stop this, that we need to be doing it in schools more around, so I think that was pretty cool too. Okay, and now we're gonna go to Lisa. Thank you.
Interesting fact, students who smoke tobacco are actually more likely to become bullies, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today is bullying, and specifically cyberbullying. And you might look at this and get kind of uncomfortable. I know some of you are smiling at me, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, she has this on her PowerPoint. But I'm sorry if you're offended, but this is the reality that your students face. You cannot just turn a blind eye on this. This message was actually sent to a 14-year-old girl repeatedly over the course of many months over an internet chat room. And the use of internet chat rooms as a form of bullying is something that's very new and something that a lot of you may not have heard of. So it's actually called cyberbullying, and that's what my paper looked at, was taking new forms of technology and looking at how students are using these in new ways to bully each other. Now, bullying has traditionally been defined as repeated aggression in a relationship with an imbalance of power. But cyberbullying has sort of put a new twist on this traditional definition. I'm going to give you a scenario and see what you think about it. Let's say that I'm on Facebook chat and I'm talking to Julie. Hi. And we're talking to each other about this cute new boy that just moved into our school and how great he is and how we love him, all that stuff. And then when we're about to end the conversation, I say, oh, hey, Julie, BTW, that skirt you wore yesterday was fugly. But that's all I say to her, and then I say, talk to you later, good night, see you in school tomorrow. That's only one comment that was negative. Is that considered bullying? Some of you are nodding your heads. Well, this is what cyberbullying has sort of brought to the forefront, is changing this definition of bullying. And you can see that this definition is from 2009, and it's already starting to get out of date. Now, I love this quote. With no boundaries or tangible consequences, children are using technology to vent normal frustration in ways that can become very destructive. And that's one of the key things that you need to remember, is that this is different than normal bullying, because the bullies are removed from the consequences of their action. I don't know that Julie cried that whole night because I didn't like her skirt. I don't know that because I wasn't there. So therefore, all I know is that that was a fact. I just stated a fact. I didn't like your skirt. I thought it was ugly. That's all I know. And that's what these students are finding, that they're removed from that aggression. And a lot of them are saying things over the internet that they wouldn't say on a normal basis, face-to-face with someone. Now, online harassment is sort of what I talked about with the scenario of Facebook chat. Online aggression, or online harassment, is just one solitary act of aggression, just one little comment to a person that still is considered harmful. And this new technology is creating new outlets for bullies to use for their aggression. I talked about Facebook chat, so other things like Instant Messenger, AIM. You can also talk about personal websites that people can create. Of course, Facebook messages, Facebook statuses. You can tag people in statuses now. Twitter, blogs, email, Instant Messenger. The list just keeps getting longer and longer. In New York, this was an interesting incident. A few teenage boys decided that they wanted to create their own website. And what the website was for was to find out who people thought was the biggest hoe in their school. So people could go to this website and nominate someone by name, and the website kept a tally. I know, it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. They're so mean. But they're, again, removed from the consequences of their actions. And actually 150 girls, 150 were nominated on this website before I think it was the district attorney of the district actually got the website provider to take the website down, because the provider said, hey, I don't care what they put on the website. I'm just providing them with an outlet for their aggression. Chat room use is on the rise with middle school students. This statistic is just from 2005, so it's already out of date. And it just said that 25% of 6 to 13-year-olds use chat rooms regularly. Regularly in 2005, exponentially has increased since 2005. They found that a lot of the students would use this as a way to slander their fellow students, blackmail, spread rumors, purposely excluding someone. If you know that someone's on a chat room, they were just talking to you, you said a comment, and now they aren't talking to you, that still is a form of purposely excluding them, and that still is a form of bullying. And that's something that a lot of students don't think about. This third bullet point here, these are a lot of the sort of signs that someone is going to be bullied or has the potential to be bullied just in the chat rooms. Reduced popularity among peers, low social integration, low self-esteem. School-related behavioral problems, those can be things like showing up late for class continually, sleeping in class, that type of thing, or even not showing up at all. Low levels of self-esteem, I already said that, sorry. Popularity, and children of overprotective parents. Now, also what this study found is that it's difficult to know if this is a causation or not. It's a correlation, but they haven't decided if becoming victims of chat room abuse is creating these things in those students, or if these are just the things that bullies target. Also, an interesting fact from this study is that all of these things on the third bullet point are indicators that someone's going to be bullied in a normal classroom environment. So the same indicators in the classroom are the indicators of someone being bullied in a chat room. A lot of, I guess, a misnomer is that people say, oh, well, if someone's bullied at school, they can just turn around and anonymously bully the bully right back at home. And that's repeatedly been found to not be true. Social ostracism is an interesting concept that I've never even thought about. But you all know how it is when you say something to one of your friends, you get a little mad, you say something that maybe you regret, you text them and you're like, hey, I didn't mean that, I'm sorry. And then you just sit there waiting and waiting and waiting. Like, oh no, it's been 10 minutes and they haven't texted me back, and I know they are in class. Well, that's social ostracism with cell phone use, and that's what this study looked at. And what they did was they took college participants, that's key to remember, college participants, and they gave them all cell phones. And they put them all in individual rooms. They couldn't see the other participants. And one of the person running the experiment texted all of them on the cell phones and said, hi, this is a test. Did you get it? Send it back to me. So all the cell phones worked. Everyone knew how to text. Then what they did is the person running the study just sent one text message to each of them and said, hey, do you smoke? And the people who said that they did smoke, they kept talking to, and they kept texting. But the ones who said that they didn't smoke, they completely cut off. They stopped talking at all too. And what they found was, since they were purposely ostracizing these people, how that influenced these 4 fundamental needs: self-esteem, control, desire to belong, and meaningful existence. And they continually found that even though these people were only ostracized for 8 minutes, all of those 4 fundamental needs were hindered by this idea of social ostracism. It was interesting because people often blame themselves. So the participants wouldn't say, oh, I bet the scientist is just busy running the experiment that they can't text me back. No, they're blaming themselves, being like, oh, well, he didn't text me back because I don't smoke. That kind of sucks. So that's an interesting phenomenon, I thought. And it's important to remember that these are college students. They were only ostracized for 8 minutes. And they didn't know the person ostracizing them. They didn't have to go to math class and sit by them the next day. So you can take these 4 fundamental needs and multiply it by 1,000, and that's what middle schoolers feel. When they send someone a text or, Facebook chat, and they don't get any response. Sexting. Oh, sexting. Oh, sexting. This was a very disturbing thing for me to read. I actually had a personal experience with sexting. One of my ex-boyfriends, he had a younger sister, and he shoved a cell phone in my face one day. And it was a picture of his sister naked. And I was like, too much information, what are you doing? And he said, She sent this around school. She did it herself. And she would be prosecuted for sending, receiving, or forwarding nude or semi-nude photos. And this definition, again, like we saw earlier, is already out of date because so many cell phones are tied to the internet now that you can get charged with sexting if you have a picture on Facebook that you got from someone's phone, if you email it to someone via your cell phone. So this is kind of a definition that you need to modify a little bit. And I found it startling that people as young as the 4th grade were sexting. 4th grade, I don't know what they think they have to send to people in 4th grade. Taking pictures of. But apparently somebody thinks it was worth it. 1 in 5 teens actually admitted to some form of sexting, whether it was sending, receiving, or the likewise. You have to remember that, they don't understand that if they're sending this great picture to their boyfriend, what happens when your boyfriend finds out that you cheated on him with his best friend? What do you think he's going to do with that picture that's on his phone? He's going to send it to everybody, and they don't think of that. They don't think about these long-term consequences for their action. And unfortunately, that happened to this teen in Ohio in 2008. She had sent a picture of her boyfriend, harmless, you think. Well, unfortunately, they broke up. And he sent that picture to literally hundreds of people. They went to different high schools. He sent it to people at her school as well as people at his school. She stopped going to school because people were telling her that she was an attention-seeking whore. She just wanted attention from her boyfriend. She didn't mean to send it to all those people, but they were still harassing her because they had already all received the message. They already knew about it. So she stopped going to school. She even went as far as she did an anonymous interview with reporters warning about the dangers of sexting and telling kids don't do this because you don't even know. Unfortunately, she committed suicide out of the entire situation. She went to a funeral of a friend that had committed suicide, and her mom said that she just snapped. She went home and did the same thing because that was the only thing that she thought that could stop it. And that's sort of where her mom works into this situation because her mom had notified the school district that this was happening. And all the school did was they punished the guy. They punished the boyfriend, they took his cell phone away, took the picture. By that point, hundreds of teenagers already had that. Yes.
Lisa, is that in connection with the story today?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's
Are you
a
gonna talk
completely
about that?
different incident. Unfortunately, they didn't say
Okay.
anything else about the girl from the very beginning at the chat room.
Okay.
I wondered the same thing.
Yeah,
It's like,
because
what are the
after I read your paper, I was
consequences
like,
of
oh my
that?
goodness. Okay,
No, it was different. And this girl was older. She was about to graduate from high school.
okay.
And she committed suicide. I can't imagine about that 14-year-old girl. What effect that must have had on her.
Now, how many, you may want to tell the class, how many are been prosecuted? Have you seen that class? I immediately thought of your paper, but when you go in tonight, you may see it on the news, and I'll make this time up for you. But it's in conjunction, directly in conjunction with what our presentation is about, and I think they're going to be 9 or 15.
It's 9.
Is it 9? And 2 are girls who
Yeah,
were
we're
bullied.
prosecuting, no, 2 are boys.
2
are
boys.
boys being charged with
Sexual,
statutory rape, and then the
Statutory
other
rape.
ones are just other people who are charged with slander and other things of such nature.
I'm sorry, a girl committed suicide because she was bullied. And so they're now, I think it's all in the courts now. It's turned over to the courts. But they're asking principals now, if you know of someone who's bullying, to turn in their names. They're trying to pass a law as of today. If you even know that bullying is taking place, that they're asking principals to turn in these names. So this is a big deal for you going into teaching because it happens so much in middle school. But it was a I don't know how old she was.
She was 14.
14. So that's why I thought it was the same story. Well,
And that's one of the problems that we saw from this case because the mom tried to get the school to do something and that was all they did, was prosecute the boyfriend. And if you look at the different states around the United States, they're coming up with all sorts of charges. They're charging the girls who took the photos willingly. They're charging those girls. They're charging the boyfriends who received the message, even if they didn't want the message. They're charging those boys too. I mean, they brought charges of disseminating child pornography, felony obscenity. the people taking these messages or taking these pictures of themselves are getting charged as sex offenders in some states. And the United States Supreme Court hasn't accepted a case of this, because it's their decision what they decide to rule on, and they haven't accepted one of these cases yet. And I'm predicting that within the next few years they will,
I think
because
so.
it's so varied across the different states as to how to punish these people, especially for sexting. That's one of the most controversial things about cyberbullying. I just want to talk briefly about what our role is, and I really think that parents are a little oblivious. One of the studies found that the majority of parents said that their teenagers were using the internet mainly for academic purposes. Then they turned around and asked the students, their kids, and the kids said, no, that's not what we're using the internet for. So you find this huge discrepancy between what parents think they know and what they actually know. And I think that our job as educators is to say, hey, have you thought about checking your kid's cell phone for pictures? Has that occurred to you? Maybe you should think about that. A lot of the school districts held workshops where they invited the students as well as the parents, as well as local law enforcement people actually, to educate them about their roles in cyberbullying. Some schools are doing full advisory units just on cyberbullying. A lot of the students don't realize that when they don't text their friend right back, that can be seen as a form of bullying. And we all do it, we all forget, but you need to make sure that you tell these middle school students, hey, if it's a really, really important conversation, you should probably get back to them right away. I would appreciate that. You also need to know your school's policies. There was an assistant principal in Virginia who was actually caught in a very tricky situation. His school didn't really have a policy about cyberbullying. And he had heard that there was an instance of sexting in his school, so he found the child that he thought had started the whole thing. He found a picture on the kid's phone and said, okay, we'll send it to my phone. So we sent it to his phone so that he could download it on his computer. I know some of you were like, oh my gosh, what an idiot. Yeah, pretty much an idiot, because he got charged with child pornography.
Yes, he did.
Because it was on his computer. The charges were dropped, but if you Google this guy's name, it's all over the internet. I mean, he's tarnished forever. And he didn't even mean to. He was trying to punish the kid. He wanted proof, and his school district didn't stand beside him because they didn't have policy in cyberbullying. So one of the things that we can do as new educators to impress our principals or whatever is say, hey, do you have a policy about this? You don't? Let me write it. So we need to remember that cyberbullying really is an extension of school bullying in some way, shape, or form. The bullies find the students at school, target them when they get home, then the kid has to turn around the next day and go back to school and sit by the kid the next day in math class. It's a cycle, and we're part of the cycle, and we can help stop it.
Can I just point out one thing real quick about cyberbullying?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
Go.
Okay. All right, so sticking in the same vein of social issues, all right, I'll start kind of a quick trail of where I was coming from. The state of education, to identify my problem, the state of education, the federal government says that we're not meeting other countries on tests. And how do we fix that problem? Well, they say that we just keep testing and teach better. But I think you need to redefine the problem, and I don't think we'd be failing as compared to other countries if we could get all students in this country to do better. And so I'll show you a video that tells you a little bit better what I'm talking about. It's got a lot of information in it, but I will go through the information in my document.
It should work here. No, I saw it there. Well, I just saw it there, and it was trying to come up, I don't know what happened.
And yet, when you look at the demographic makeup of our students, almost 70% are students of color. So is there a traditional disconnect? What impediments might be in the way? Do we really have high expectations for all of our students?
Once we get to high expectations for all, the next issue that we really have to deal with is the adequacy of funding in California. We'll meet those high expectations and high rigorous accountability, but we can't continue to ask people to do more with less.
The reason the achievement gap exists, the reason the teacher quality gap exists, at the end of the day, it might sound simple and a little bit trite, but it's the expectations we have for our kids. And generally speaking, we as an education system don't believe poor kids and kids of color can learn at the same rate as more affluent and white and Asian kids.
If you do not provide the children in the inner city with an equitable education, if you don't provide them with quality teachers, if you don't provide them with textbooks that are state-of-the-art and up-to-date, if you don't provide them with the resources that kids in the suburban areas are getting, you're telling them without saying it verbally that you don't have high expectations for them.
What we are finding out is just from a literacy perspective, that they are not introducing the kind of literacy that they need to have. In other words, boys need to read stuff about boys. And oh, by the way, it can't be just any boy. It has to be a boy or a man who is a positive role model. You have to give them that possibility inside of the book, because they don't see that reality in their neighborhoods because there are no male role models in many of those neighborhoods. Now, boys are the lowest performers in the district. African American boys fall very closely by Latino boys. Bingo, there's your game population right there. If they aren't doing well, they drop out, they become your game members.
We know that some schools have enjoyed success in closing the achievement gap, not eliminating, but closing. So we need to replicate many of those programs. And quite frankly, what might work for a subgroup of African American students in an urban district might not work for that same subgroup of African American students in a more rural district.
In the public school system, particularly in the inner city school, you have predominantly second and third year teachers, some teachers that are straight out of college.
So that is what I'm addressing, the achievement gap. And so the achievement gap, this is from the College Board in 1999, when we just started to really intensively look at this sort of stuff. Simply what it is scores reveal that middle-class black students perform no better than poor white students. So that's the basic achievement gap, but then it's the gap between black middle class and white middle class students is larger than the gap in performance between poor white and poor black students. So it's also on socioeconomic status as well. They find that it begins in middle school, because in middle school students become aware of racism, bigotry, and the unequal treatment of others. So students are developing, they're starting to figure out their place in the world, and that's when you have a disconnect between what students want and need and what schools desire. Kids want to figure out who they are, what they're doing here, and schools want good test scores. So how do you maintain motivation with that kind of a disconnect? The problem is understood through sociology with the stereotype threat, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it posits that when there are negative stereotypes about the intellectual capacity of certain groups, members of that group suffer adverse consequences. In this case, we're talking academically. So what the stereotype effect does in student motivation is it lowers their self-perception. But what's worse about that is teacher expectations. Teachers have, when certain populations of students come into the classroom, they have expectations of that student. And because they're bombarded with information, even when you listen to like the government, when they're talking about how to make good reforms in schools, all they do is keep talking about the horrible numbers that black students or poor students or whatever disadvantaged population, they just talk about how bad they have it. And that's all that anyone ever hears, instead of hearing other sides of it. And low performance is not an indicator of motivation or achievement. It's to say that, because a lot of intellectually developed students they found have higher dropout rates, so they're not totally sure why that is, but just not getting good grades doesn't mean that you don't have intellectual capacity. It means there's some other underlying social issue. So what the research showed is support from school staff, which is kind of obvious, and a challenging curriculum. So, and one and the other doesn't work, and you have to have in conjunction with each other. But particular to what we're looking at, in the achievement gap is racial and ethnic identity. Greatly contributes to student motivation and achievement. And in this study here, they said that adolescents of color are more likely to be actively engaged in the exploration of their racial or ethnic identity than are white adolescents. So as I said earlier, all students in general want to figure out who they are, what's going on, but particularly African American students and other students of color are discovering that. So instead of letting it be up to all the negative numbers in the media, having positive role models in the school, talking about it in the middle school, and that's all to combat the negative narrative. Because just day in and day out you hear that negative narrative, which exacerbates the stereotype threat. And a big thing is group work, because I noticed that there's a big decline from elementary school to middle school because of the loss of the pod structure, which some of you might know or not know what that is, but that's, you're with the same group of kids all day, a lot of times with the same teacher all day, so you build relationships with everybody, and that works. So they say to try and replicate that somehow, a number of different ways in the middle school. And also eliminate the honor roll and academic competition. As the one guy said in the movie, not all things work in all schools, but in schools particularly that have high and low socioeconomic students, because the honor roll and the academic competition thing, that's supposed to recognize good academic achievements, but a lot of times students that have potential but have a bad home life just aren't achieving well. So in actuality, you're only giving accolades for their good home life. And what's sort of obvious and sort of pointless to say but needs to be said is a good teacher is really important. For 62 to 82%, and that number varies because it's broken down by gender and age, but roughly 62 to 81% of African American students said that pleasing the teacher is more important than pleasing their parents. So that only emphasizes how important the teacher is in the classroom. And if the teacher has a low bar, and they meet that bar, it seems like they're doing well, even though if the teacher had just expected more out of them, they would have probably done more. And from a book, Thompson, 2002, he interviewed a lot of students, they were all African American students, through their different levels of education. And one student, Vincent, who was a senior in high school, ready to go to college, was talking about bad teachers, and he said in his bad teachers, they were preoccupied with discipline, which decreased instructional time, which again only makes the problem worse because now you're taking time out of the day to correct things. It was probably because they wanted us to talk, and if the teacher had figured out how to harness that energy and done things like exploring ethnic identity and things like that, instructional time wouldn't have been lost. Out of the 271 students, more than half identified language arts English teachers as the best, and a close second was social studies. And I sort of thought why, because a lot of people grumble when I tell them I'm a social studies teacher, because it's just boring. But what Thompson said was it could have been one of two things, that the teachers were either patient, friendly, explaining things well, fair, just good teachers in general. But more likely, however, the classes allowed these students to see other African Americans in their books, and poems, literature, in movies, historical figures, and so on. But in addition to being able to discuss the history and literary issues regarding the topic of what Thompson called being black in America. So some conclusions. Teachers have to have high expectations for all students, and like the one lady said in the movie, that sounds kind of trite, but it really, teachers really make or break their students, and particularly struggling students from any traditionally disadvantaged population. NCLB, which is No Child Left Behind, and the current Race to the Top programs don't work as is, and I say that because I watched an interview with Diane Ravitch, who was the former Assistant Secretary of Education under Bush, who was a huge proponent of NCLB. She got it kind of passed, and now has come out strongly against it with a book, saying that it just focuses on competition, doesn't really offer any strategies, doesn't figure out how to fix the problem in this country. It just strives to make certain kids better than other kids in other countries, which is sort of like we're chasing our tails on that one. And the achievement gap is just a statistical representation of the shortcomings of our educational system. And like I said, it's crucial that teachers recognize when students come into their room to hold them to high expectations and to look at two students not based on anything but just as their potential. And some students need more help, but that doesn't mean that they should be held to a lower standard or different standard, but not a ridiculous standard either. Just knowing that there is a gap in the system, and that a huge strides could be made with a little bit of teacher motivation. And now,
weekends. And me, I had gone from homeschool jungle freak to shiny plastic to most hated person in the world to actual human being. Hey. All the drama from last year just wasn't important anymore. School used to be like a Shark Tank, but now I could just float. Finally, Girl World was at peace.
That's really basically what we wanted to show you, all the different things that happen to middle schoolers. World can be at peace, hopefully, but